Alrighty, so welcome back to WorkSmart Live. We're so excited. It's our very first live episode in the new Level Up series. And it's been a little while since we've done some live webinars. So Marissa and I are really excited to be back. But this series is a little bit different than the series we've done in the past because it actually combines live webinars, like this, and pre-recorded mini how-to videos that we send you like every other week. We also call these cheat code videos. And everything in this series is designed to kind of help you take what you've got as your foundation and level up your business game. So our live episodes and our cheat code episodes are also designed for like two different types of audiences in your office. So we have the first half of the month designed to cater to your leadership team. So things that they need to know and hear about and think about when it comes to strategy. And then the second half of the month, we really focus on the how-to for the everyday end user who doesn't necessarily, need to know how to strategize creating a communications plan, right? But they might need to know how to actually use the tools in the communications plan, like Teams. So we sort of split up the month half and half each month, and each month has a different theme. So we're starting today with communications. So Marissa, let's talk communications.
Why, I'd be happy to. Just kidding. It is great to be back. So we thought we'd start with a conversation that is at the forefront for everybody. The pandemic gave us an opportunity to learn how to communicate when we weren't face to face. And we learned some lessons along the way. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of touch back on that foundation of communication, but also some really cool ways to level up with the technology that you already have. So let's talk about kind of why we care. People want to be inspired. They want communication to be quick and relevant, but they want it to be easy, right? Adding a bunch of tools across the different platforms isn't easy, although it could help you achieve your mission of clearer communication, more engaged people. But Microsoft 365 has taught us that cloud-based tools can serve all sorts of functions for real-time communication and creating those virtual workspaces of teamwork, right? These are the things that we know. We've talked about Teams, we've talked about Outlook, we've talked about Stream. These are all ways for us to be more efficient in communication than just email. And Dawn's going to give us a kind of a refresher course on the bottlenecks that we're trying to avoid with the newer Office 3 or Microsoft 365 technology. Then there's also that component of, okay, if it's better to do communication in different ways, then how do I know what tool to use? And of course, we've talked about audience and tone and timing and timing to pick the tools, which we'll also go through here in a few seconds. The idea of leveling up comes from really honing in on how we engage with our employees better so that they're engaged with the organization. And that really kind of goes to three pillars. It's workplace communication. It's how everyone works together for collaboration to get their job done. Then it's also building this sense of community, right? We're connecting, we're humans, we want to be together. Then the next pillar really ties it all together. It's the drive from leadership. It's what they know and how they run the organization and how they use that to align all of their team members, and also making sure that they are authentic and approachable in the way that they communicate with folks. And all of this can be done better with technology. So I guess there's no reason, Dawn, for us not to hop into the first way to level up. All right.
Why, yes, workplace communications.
Familiar topic.
Familiar topic. Speaking of which, all right, so flashback. go way back to July, which I know seems like forever ago, and also maybe like yesterday because time is weird in the pandemic. Marissa and I did a webinar on cloud communication tools specifically, and how and when to choose what tools. So we didn't really want to go too deeply into any of this today, but we figured a refresher would probably be good because it's been a while. So a great communication system includes tools for communication and collaboration. So these are pieces that we're refreshing from that webinar that we did in July. So there is a difference between communication and collaboration, right? And you need different tools for different things. So communication is sort of that, here is this information for you, and the giving and receiving of that information. And then collaboration is there's the information in between people. And that is an information that they are working on together. So you need a tool that supports the people, and then also a tool which also supports the project. So, so that was one thing we wanted to remind everyone of today. And then the second piece is that when we talk about creating a communications and collaboration system, especially for communications, there's really 3 guidelines and questions that you should be starting with when you're thinking about what tools do you need and what tools should you be using in the moment. And those 3 questions are, what's your audience? Or are you talking to coworkers or company-wide broadcasts or customers? What's the speed? Is this something you need to do now, or is it something for later? And then what's the tone? Is it casual or formal? And especially with the speed, it's really important because, as one of our account managers, Neil, likes to say, you wouldn't send an email for an ambulance, right? You probably really need to call somebody about that. But on the flip side of that, you probably really don't want your team relying on chat or calling you directly just to tell you that there's a staff meeting next month, right? So when you're thinking about a communication system, you need tools and technologies that meet those different needs in different ways. So we actually created this sort of communicating in the cloud map, which is that thing that you're seeing on your screen right now, that really kind of highlights, all right, if I need something that's fast and it's going company-wide and it's communication, not collaboration, Teams is probably a great way to get that information out, and vice versa. This is a resource that we have on our website, but I will also drop the link to the chat in the chat as well. So if it's something that you maybe looked at in July and haven't seen it in a while, we can get it to you. So then the reason why this is important, Marissa, if you can go to the next slide, that would be fabulous. So this conversation really stemmed from the problem that everyone was having at that point, which was the bottleneck of email. We said, it's just time. It was time to break up with your email as your one-stop box for literally everything from everyone. And that remains true. Workplace communications are so much more effective when we use the right tools. An emphasis on this is tools, plural. There's lots of different tools for all the different jobs, because different tools are better designed for different things. So why we're talking about this today, because we've already talked about this stuff, is because now that your foundation is in place and you've probably adopted Teams and all these different things, it's time to level up. Because with this new foundation, we're seeing old problems in new ways, and then also new problems. So now we're kind of hearing from clients and our own team members even that Teams has really replaced email as a bottleneck in and of itself. And that's because there's so much happening in Teams. And while it's still really the right place for these things to happen, we need to think more about how they are happening and make some tweaks to that. So we're going to talk about that today. And one of the things, Marissa, I think you skipped a slide. Would you mind going back a sec? There we go. Yes, thank you. So for example, Microsoft Teams activity between February and August of last year showed a 55% increase in the number of meetings and calls per week. And that's a huge jump. And there's certainly a really glaring, like when I first saw this, I was like, there's a really big glaring variable that's probably skewing this data, right? I don't know if you heard, but COVID-19, but pre-COVID, my guess is that most meetings were probably happening in person for small businesses, right? And most of the communications that we're using video calls for now probably just happened really impromptu in person as well. And that's at least very true for me, because Marissa and I used to drive our suite mates probably a little nuts as we would randomly just start bouncing ideas off of each other 5 times a day from across the room. So it is possible that we had about the same amount of meetings and calls pre-COVID as we're having now, but I'd venture to guess that we are actually meeting more, maybe just not 55% more, because the need for intentional time together as compared to that really flexible and impromptu communication and collaboration that we used to have, it isn't there, right? So whether or not we're actually having more meetings and more phone calls or video calls, the one thing we know for sure from this data is that we are relying on virtual meetings and technologies more than ever. And now, whenever we communicate, there's this pane of glass in between us all the time. And that comes with new problems. So we're going to talk about some of the new problems and some hacks to address them. So one of the first things that we want to talk about is meeting game hacks. Like if we're meeting this much more, there's things that we should really be thinking about, right? So the first thing is challenging this need for meetings, right? Do we really need to meet? Or can we take advantage of some of the other options within Teams, like channels? Can we collaborate in a channel? And then do we really need to have a meeting for this thing? Or can we hit that little call now button and collaborate just as we used to in that impromptu kind of way with each other, which Marissa and I actually quite do a lot. And then the second kind of meeting game hack that we want to talk about is in an actual meeting, keeping it human. It sounds really silly, right? But keeping it human. Remember the soft skills of what we used to have in in-person meetings, right? Like do a routine icebreaker kind of at the beginning of formal meetings. You could take advantage of some of the tools within meetings. We're going to talk about some of those tools later. But also actively engaging and looking for the people who are a little bit quieter and including them in the conversation and welcoming them. Assigning roles and note-taking and moderating can really help keep that attention on the meeting, right? And then sharing an agenda. These are all things you probably know, but I think it's especially important to talk about if we're talking about virtual meetings, because there is a little bit of a difference. So the next piece is this piece about using the tools that come within Teams meetings specifically. So, and encouraging your team to use those tools like whiteboards and screen sharing and all of the things, because especially when we have that pane of glass in front of us, which is this next piece, we start to feel more fatigue in a meeting than we might in an in-person meeting. So the more that you can engage people in the tech meeting, the better. And there's better ways to do that now than ever. And some other kind of fun things that we've identified and learned throughout the process is scheduling meetings in shorter blocks or kind of weird time blocks, right? Like a 50 meeting. So we have a 10-minute buffer always in between the next one, or Zoom free Fridays. And then this last piece is just a little bit of a bonus from a psychology perspective of turning off the self view for whatever reason that seems to help people not feel quite so fatigued in a meeting. And then we are actually going to go into a lot of this stuff more really specifically for your everyday end users in this All Eyes on Teams event at the end of the month. So we'll go into how to use all of those different tools in Teams for keeping people engaged there.
Yes, we will. And the soft skills are so important in making sure that our team has clarity as well. But as I like to talk about the tech part. So we're going to talk now about some of those tools that can kind of help aid in the conversation and the communication without the meeting, right? So if we want to challenge the need for meetings, what are we going to do? So the answer is not the only answer, but the idea is that we need to communicate in different ways. We can't just rely on text anymore. We need to follow the science. We need to be able to increase engagement and be creative in the way we communicate. One of the things that I find interesting is that when I was looking for kind of statistics around this idea of visual, of course, I found like this kind of the standard things that say you remember 10% of what you hear, but you remember 80% of what you watch. But what I found to be more valuable was that people were craving this idea of visual information for things like HR. So when I think about like, oh, I'm going to remember more what I watch, I'm thinking of instructions, how to do things. But in reality, it translates to just how your brain is going to perceive the information and enjoy. And so creating more opportunities to keep folks up to date on policy changes and benefits by making it easier for people to absorb and retain, you're essentially giving people a reason to feel more connected to the organization. And some of the tools within Microsoft 365 that already exist to help with this are SharePoint news collections. It lets you create kind of that blog feel for when you still need to have a text message, but it allows you to easily incorporate graphics and really embed kind of all these other pieces from across Microsoft 365, like Stream for Video. Video is huge right now. Being in kind of the marketing space, it's no surprise that I believe strongly in video. But when I think about how I use video, I usually use it in the form of a GIF just to kind of support my message and get people to look at it. But when some of the kind of insight I can share with regards to marketing and the lessons that we've learned about retaining that message and remembering it, short and sweet is always the best. But when you can't always keep it under 60 seconds, unless you watch Marissa Explains It All, in which I do my best to keep it under 60 seconds, you index the conversation so that you can show those different chapters or those different bits so people can find what they need to easily, because that's the goal, right? Quick and relevant and making it easy. Stream does that for you with transcripts, so that's a really cool tool. And I also find it very interesting that most people don't actually watch videos with the sound on. So take advantage of adding text overlays and captions so that people can watch and get those visual cues that they crave, but also use their brain to read the things just to kind of get the highlights. Sway for storytelling is really cool as well. This is a kind of an easier way to use PowerPoint. And the best way for me to explain that to you is I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a tour for a second. I'm going to show you what some of these tools look like. The first one I'm going to show you is Sway. So when I say newsletter, I mean the exact thing that you're kind of a storyboard that you would expect from a newsletter. This gives you that flexibility to import images that you might have and some text, and then it arranges it for you in a way that is really pleasing in the way that we kind of read information. You can change the kind of the aspect of it. This is what I'm talking about with index, making it very easy to kind of sort through so you can skip ahead. Visually appealing, of course. I mean, when you talk about space, you get beautiful images. Another thing, when we talk about news, I'm gonna take you to actually a SharePoint site if I can minimize my bar ahead of me that's distracting my tabs. News sites do just what you're expecting. It's a news article that allows you to create really easily to come in here. And this is a header. You import an image just on the side here. When you click edit, it's very simple to go through and add, customize, change the text. You can post on behalf of somebody. So if your CEO, Patty Fernandez, is really busy, which she probably is, you, as Marissa, can go in and actually assign it to her as if it came from her. So there's really cool ways to do this without having to subscribe to a different tool set and without having to be a designer. Although it's great to have marketing people on your team, it's not, you don't necessarily have someone with a design background on every single department. And the idea here is that you're getting tools that everyone in the company can leverage. One of the other things, to give you a little context about Stream, you know, when we talk about video, it's easy to kind of think of YouTube. And that's what Stream is. It's an internal video platform, and it allows you to create channels so that you can sort videos, so that when someone wants to just scroll through videos, you can come in here and take a look. This is a great place to keep your trainings or meeting recordings, bits about your internal, you know, if you offer products or services. This is all great place for people to find that content, and it's searchable. And it, like I said, it does those cool things. When you click on the actual videos, you can get things like the transcript, and you can share it with others. And then if you have a really cool video, you can take it and take this little code from over here and then embed it right into that news article that we were just talking about, so that you can share news. And then you can say, if you don't want to read this whole thing, hop on over to this video, and it's right there for them. They don't have to keep clicking around. I'm gonna back out of there for a second, go back to the PowerPoint. And with Microsoft 365, the reason why the integration is so important is that we recognize that, Dawn said this earlier, tools, emphasis on the plural. Not one tool can do everything well. However, if we have the right tools that work together, then we don't have to be as concerned about how kind of the silo of information, because they all come together. And with Microsoft 365, Teams does that. It brings all of these different tools, SharePoint pages, SharePoint news, stream videos, Sway, all of that can be embedded right in Teams. So even though you're using multiple tools, you're actually only in one pane of glass. All right, so let's talk about some external players. I'm gonna bring my PowerPoint back up. I'm a little rusty on screen sharing since we've taken a break. And you will see it in a second. There we go. So external players, these are going to be your clients and your partners, because after all, your communication isn't bound by your virtual office, because it's not physical anymore. So your communication channels shouldn't either. You shouldn't only have to rely on email and phone calls to be able to talk to people who you talk to regularly. And Microsoft 365 has the ability to create guest accounts so that you don't have to license external users to be able to use things like get into Teams together. But you can also open up the permissions within your Microsoft 365 account to allow things like OneDrive document sharing or SharePoint access with other folks. Coming soon, which I think is really exciting for a lot of people, is that there's a product called Microsoft Teams Connect. It's going to be essentially an add-on to Teams, and it's just going to allow you to share channels without creating guest accounts. And that way you can have, let's say, Dawn and I want to work with a digital agency, and we want to talk with them regularly. We can just go ahead and share a channel with our own teams that'll pop up in their environment, and all of the security permissions are taken care of. Kind of neat. But kind of thinking more beyond how we communicate is, again, making sure that we are communicating well.
Yes, and we just had a question come in. So I apologize, I was reading that question. It's a really great question that I'm actually going to address here in this about communication health points. So you have perfect timing.
Ooh.
Ooh, okay. So I'm going to save that for the end though.
All right.
All right. So when we talk about communication, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of things. We just talked about a lot of stuff. But there are some kind of like umbrella concepts that are going to really, really help you level up your game and create a healthy communication system. So the first one that I always really like to talk about is setting clear expectations. So one of the things that we hear kind of a lot from people is, maybe their team isn't necessarily following the communication expectations that they have. They have teams and people aren't using it. So we can have these perfect plans and we can have the perfect tool, but if they are perfectly just in your head, we're going to have some trouble, right? This is a life lesson almost that I feel like I have to learn sometimes. People can't meet the expectations that we don't express, right? Like my husband can't remember to bring something home if I don't ask him to. So it's really important, especially when it comes to communications plans and communication strategies, to document what your expectations are. And to share that plan, and then also to remember that you as a leader, whether people read a document or not, are going to be who your team is looking to for, like the example to follow. So communicate your expectations and then also be an active leader and like really show the way, right? So if you, for one example that I've heard a few times is if you have this expectation, sometimes people have an expectation that people will not multitask during meetings. And that might feel really frustrating if people multitask during meetings. But if it's not really noted anywhere out loud, that's a challenge, it's going to create friction in the communication with anyone and everyone because there's miscommunications happening. So which leads me to the next point, and something I highly recommend that anyone does is that you create a communications culture guide and you share that in your organization and wherever that happens to be that you house all of your really great resource documents. We have some tips and suggestions on that too. But your communications culture guide should include something that highlights the tools and the use cases for those tools that you are currently using in your organization. Kind of like that cloud communications map that we showed you earlier that talks about here's the tone and here's the speed and here's the tool, right? But we also think you should include expectations around, things like if you don't want people to multitask in a meeting, or do you have an internal sort of idea that emails are going to be responded to within 24 hours? Or fun things. Do you like to use GIFs? Is that okay? Sometimes people come in and they're not really sure if that's okay, but maybe it is part of your culture. And putting that into a culture guide really helps engage those employees from day one, kind of like what we talked about in our cheat code episode last week about getting people on board as fast as possible and engaged and excited. So including stuff that in your culture guide can be great. And then also, do you have any internal language uses, like an internal lexicon? And I know that might sound a little strange to some companies, but I was just looking at the culture guide for a research place, and they had terms in their culture guide for all sorts of things. And granted, there are research facilities, so that's kind of in their culture in general, but they documented this is what a check-in meeting means, and this is what a roundtable meeting means. So when you see these words in communication and emails, now you know what they mean. Or they had like acronyms for like NTT, which meant to them next time try, which was kind of cool. So that might not be something that you necessarily need a ton of, but maybe there are different meetings or different learning experiences that you have in office that people kind of need to know the name for. So including that in the communications culture guide. And then this last piece something I really recommend that everybody does is creating almost like a video tour guide through Teams or any other platforms that your team relies on a lot, that shows them, I just caught Marissa's face, that shows people, all right, so this is where you go to find HR documents in your team's tenant, because everybody's team's tenant looks a little bit different. And this is where you go to find the marketing team's documents and all of the trainings and etc. Or any other tool that you happen to really use a lot, but creating a video tour guide and making sure that that is out, especially in onboarding to everybody that needs it, but also as a resource for long-term employees, right? And then this next part is something Marissa kind of already spoke to a lot, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but including processes for different listening and learning styles, right? So using multiple mediums. So do you use SharePoint news and have a lot of text articles? Great. Maybe also think about doing some videos, because different people are going to learn from different things. And it's important, if you're going to have a communication system, to think about all the different ways that different people communicate and learn. So using multiple mediums. Another important point here is also sometimes to think about communicating the same thing in different ways, especially if it's something really important, right? So we will post important company updates in our SharePoint news, but then we might also go and into our Teams channel and be like, hey, there's this new blog article that is really important and you should take a look at it, and here's the link. Or we might do something like that in Teams, and then also use, there's a really handy little share to Outlook button on the Teams messages themselves that you can then send it also to people's inboxes, which is great. Again, you hit a variety of preferences for the same message, which is awesome. And then the last piece is just making sure that feedback is always part of your culture, right? So creating a like two-way communication system that allows employees to share their own voices and raise their concerns, and that you are actively seeking that that feedback kind of all the time, right? Because if Teams is becoming a bottleneck, you need to know that Teams is becoming a bottleneck, so that we can collaborate and work together on making it a little bit more effective for you.
Definitely. Do you want to go ahead and answer that question?
Yes, I do. Okay, so the question was, how do you handle losing a sense of team from employees working remotely and not benefiting from the community of the office? I think that is a great question. It is a great question. And it part of it really comes down to this, this idea of having a really clear and expressed expectancy idea, etc., around culture. So and it's, communications culture, but also like connection culture, right? So here at WorkSmart, we have a couple of different ways that we do that. We have a social circuit channel within our Teams tenant, and we're actually looking at moving some of that into Yammer too. But that keeps us engaged. It's like, ooh, she's very excited about Yammer. But that keeps people engaged, right, on a day-to-day basis in a casual way. And we post things there like pictures of our pets or our kids, or like we just did a March Madness challenge. So me as the events planner, we've really, really, really increased the number of social events that we're doing throughout the year to help people kind of get engaged. So there's a couple of different elements to that question. I think another great way that you can address that is by thinking intentionally about how you're doing meetings and remembering some of those soft skill things, like including that kind of routine icebreaker. It could just be something like, we do what's your personal and professional best at the beginning of every meeting for that day or that week, so that we continue to hear something about each other's personal lives, and it's not always just work that we're communicating about. But this is a topic that I could go on and on and on about, because it's something I'm really passionate about. So if you would like to talk more, feel free to reach out to me directly.
And it also, we talk about timing. It's a great segue into the next kind of level up we're going to talk about, which is that community. You know, a sense of belonging is fundamental. I'm gonna skip back for a second. It's fundamental to the way that human beings, they thrive. We've learned through the pandemic, and it's clear through that question that it's widespread, that we used to be able to have water cooler chat. We used to be able to tap the person on the shoulder next to us to have those personal touches. But it's not just the social aspect of it either. It's the benefit that you get from, and I'm going to steal this from a colleague from earlier. Actually, literally today we had this conversation. What do you do when you no longer have someone overhearing, someone who's more junior, listening to two senior people solve a problem? And so the technology can help solve some of those problems. So, we're using Microsoft Teams, right? Dawn said this. We're using Teams to have ask questions and to share interest and to spread ideas across the organization. We're connecting with one another on an ongoing basis, and we're hopefully fostering these organic communities that just kind of come up natural when you're spending 40 hours-ish a week with the same people over and over again in the same space. You're probably eating lunch with these folks in addition to sitting next to them. But at some point, group communication can get hard in Microsoft Teams because you are managing every aspect of what used to be multifaceted in the office in one pane of glass, but also in one way. Teams was really built to be a chat-based app. And so this is the idea, is that you're working with people regularly. You're getting better at completing tasks and project management, and it's quick interaction to get your job done. We've added on those other aspects because it was a chat-based platform, but the mechanics of Teams doesn't allow for a very fluid experience. And when I advocate for Yammer, I use the phrase social networking tool, and it can be a little, I don't want it to be misleading, because it's the idea is that you are connecting socially with one another across the organization, but it's not just leisure conversations that can benefit from this, right? It's also kind of informing, engaging, and just a gathering place for those conversations where two senior techs are trying to resolve an issue, but they do it in a way that is visual, or I should say, available for other people to watch in. And this is kind of how I like to balance that. Teams is really around getting the work done. Yammer is around connecting the organization around the things that you need to know to be a happy and fulfilled and engaged, productive team member. And I'm going to take a break from the PowerPoint for a second, and I'm going to show you the technology because I think it's really important to see. So let me switch over to my browser again. I'm showing you the browser-based versions in my Edge. So now I just have to find what I did with Edge. Here we go. And so I guess if I hit share, it'll help too. So we're back to stream, right? But now Yammer. All right, let's move this bar out of my way. Yammer, when I talk about the way Teams is built, let me show you Teams for a second. It's built with your ability to chat one-on-one. It's built for your group communications through channels. You can have your conversations here in posts. This used to be called chat at channels, but now it's posts. For you to post information, and you can have conversations together, but you can also collaborate together on the files and all the other pieces that you need to get your job done. When you scroll through, there's no, other than your activity, there's no news feed, there's no easy way to kind of tag a post so that you can search it a little bit easier. Yammer, on the other hand, gives you that home feed where you can have things populate here. What it also does is it allows you to also track things by topic. So if you think about in social media, when you're doing hashtags and you're at mentioning things, you're tagging the topics so that you can search for them more easily. So where you might go to the QA channel at your company to work on a QA project, you might not want somebody from marketing going to that channel to try to get some information about quality management. So what you can do here is you can make announcements through all sorts of groups, and you can actually tag things, you can share them, you can emote to them just like you do in Teams. You can actually create yourself an inbox so that you get notified when things happen. And the really cool thing, again, is that it all integrates back into Teams. So you don't actually have to pull up Yammer. You can attach it as a tab in any of these channels, but you can also have an app just right off to the side. So when you want to pop into asking a question to the QA team, you can go into the actual discussion, the community's dashboard right here. When you talk about making those connections, you talk about those organic communities, your team can create communities that are unrelated to work. I'll show you when you discover more. This is Contoso. This is kind of my demo account. So this isn't real, but it kind of gives you the idea that when you want to search for, maybe it's the parents. During the pandemic, I have learned all sorts of really cool ways to ignore my children while I'm trying to do a meeting. And so maybe it's something I want to share here in the group with the rest of, maybe Megan wants to learn a little bit more. So I can create a group about parents at Contoso, and we can all kind of come in and share pictures and do this, and people can choose to be a part of it, or they can choose, maybe that's not for me. Maybe what I'm doing every night is playing video games. And so I want to have a video game community. And so you're not distracting from work at all. You're giving people an opportunity to participate. I'm going to back out of my Yammer conversation. Otherwise, like Dawn said about social skills, I could probably talk to you about Yammer all day. Yammer isn't going to be for everyone. So let's be clear. We don't need to add another tool if there's no reason to. If you're a 10-person organization, you probably don't need another tool to help you be social. Different channels called social channel could be just fine. But when you start having 20-person teams and 5 or 6 teams, and they're all in different locations, having a little bit of clarity and setting expectation is going to be helpful in knowing what tool and choosing what tool is right for your organization.
So Marissa, while you switch back over to the PowerPoint, I'm going to answer Alicia's question that came in. It said, any suggestions for how to keep everyone involved if only half of your staff sit at a computer and half company email, but the others are not online for work? And I do have some thoughts on that for sure. And I'll speak to the tech piece, or just reiterate the tech piece before we jump into more of the concepts and ideas portion. But like Marissa said, having a dedicated tech hub, almost, so to speak, for social and casual connection is a great idea. And it's not necessarily that you even necessarily have to be on the computer all day for and to be engaged in and excited by. I would encourage, if your team isn't already doing this, but having everybody have the Teams app on their phone, which does involve people in more of an active way throughout the day, whether they're sitting at a desk or out in the field. So that's sort of the like tech element. The other ideas and things that I would sort of think about and talk about are again, as always, sort of like the theme of this, right? Like being really intentional about what you're doing. So for us here at WorkSmart, I mentioned that our social events and during the pandemic probably, I don't know, quadrupled. And really, in some ways, we have some sort of social opportunity on the calendar once a week, whether it's a meditation class or a happy hour, or like we just did a virtual vacation to Shed Aquarium where we had lunch with sea lions, which was so much fun, by the way. But it's creating intentional times on people's calendars for when to come together and be engaged and involved. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is going back to meetings. So everybody has meetings, right? Everybody has meetings, whether you're out in the field or not. And in a meeting, remembering those soft skills of doing that kind of icebreaker at the beginning, that at least we're remembering that we're humans for that period of time, which encourages making friends and continuing those conversations outside of the meetings. But also, again, like watching for those people who are quiet, who just sit in the background and don't say a lot, and working to include everyone and engage everyone and have those conversations and get people excited and engaged in those ways, because everybody has meetings, everybody has them. So taking advantage of things that like that you already have, and then being more intentional and adding opportunities, and then having that social thing. And then the last thing I'll say is having passive options too. Like we do fundraisers and we do book drives that maybe people don't necessarily have to be somewhere for, right? They don't have to join a Zoom thing, but everybody can have a conversation in Teams about our book drive that's coming up, or participate in March Madness. So passive options, intentional options, Tech Hub, all the things.
And part of that, that question is really from a leadership perspective, it's knowing how to reach out to everybody, right? We want to create meaningful connections from the top down. And so we need to level up leadership communication, because in essence, it requires a lot of communication. You're aligning people to your vision, your business's vision and purpose and goals. And then you need to communicate the plan of action so that they know how they're working towards those goals. Then you need to make sure that the right people are handling that work. And then no big deal, while coaching and motivating them to do really well. And the sneak peek cheat code ahead, doing this is really beneficial. When people have clarity on how their role contributes to the overall organization, when they know what's expected of them, they're generally motivated to be a part and to move forward. And Dawn said earlier, remembering about a praise, coming from the top down, feeling appreciated, knows that they're contributing to the organization. So it's not only just knowing that you have to do the work, but also acknowledging that they're doing that work. And so all of these things mean that you're super busy, in case you didn't know about your schedule. So technology can make it simpler and more natural for you to have these conversations so that you can build trust. And it's not just for business owners, it's also for department heads and managers. It's for people who have key roles within the organization. Maybe it's the sales team or your account managers. You want to create an environment where you can put yourself in the seat to answer questions and to listen and to respond. And doing that virtually can be done through things like town halls, Q&A sessions, or just being spontaneous through chat messaging. And all of this uses the tools we've kind of already talked about, SharePoint, Teams, Stream, and Yammer. And really cool, if you checked out our cheat code about the using a template to create a SharePoint site, you can do the same thing for your leadership team. So you have this place where everybody can go to be able to see bios and pictures about the leaders. Maybe you want to talk about a little bit more about what you do on your free time, so that you do identify that the element of human nature. But it's also to just genuinely provide people with a place to ask those hard questions and know that they're going to get an answer. And that's that two-way dialogue Dawn was talking about. And the last thing that I have is another demo. I get too excited so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully get quicker at selecting my other screen. Technology.
I need to bring up the Marissa Explains It All timer.
I know. Ooh, it stresses me out. My editing session has ended. So this is a pre-built site on the SharePoint lookbook.microsoft.com. And it is a template that you hit one button and it creates this entire site. And this is paving the way to using all the great things that Microsoft knows based on experience and all of your experiences, is that this is the information that's going to help you stay connected. And so it gives you a template to kind of drop in your information so that you can share news regularly, have Q&As where you live answer questions and the recordings go right here. So people, if they missed it, they can come check it out and then continue the conversation in place. You can link different articles and pictures, add an event calendar. It's all things to bring all the things that you do in a way that, again, it can be delegated. Someone can post on your behalf. Someone can send emails on your behalf. And they can help you moderate questions. So there's a lot of super rich benefits from it.
Benefits, I think. Yeah.
Communication.
Both are fine.
Needs to go in our culture guide.
Yes, exactly. It's an internal lexicon.
Right. So, it's all a matter of how we're using the tools for our organization, right? We can't just have more technologies because that doesn't simplify things. So the idea of today was to kind of walk through some of those soft skills that will help in shifting some kind of strategic points that'll help you from shifting from this concept of only working in person to a more collaborative environment online. And the technology that's going to help you do that. So we're proud to award you all a high score. You earned meaningful and more natural communication in an engaged workforce because the skills that we performed or perfected today, just to kind of wrap it all up in a kitschy way, we leveled up our engagement with 3 things. We really honed in on what we did well with workplace communication and taught you how to get even better with the right tools. And then building that sense of community, bringing more intention to it. And then also just making it a little bit easier for you to communicate all the things that you need for an organization to be running towards the growth future. And I do believe that brings us to questions.
So I'm sure you all have a million more questions. So please type furiously into the Q&A and we're happy to answer whatever else comes through in the next couple minutes.
Jeopardy music.
We need some like 8-bit style Jeopardy music. I feel like that's probably a thing that exists. We'll have to find it. Okay, so while you're typing furiously, Marissa, if you want to go to the next slide, I can tell people about the events that are coming up.
Why, I'd be happy to, Dawn.
Why, thank you. All right, so we have a couple more events coming up in the Level Up series, and this series is going to go for a little while. But the second part of our communications theme is this session on All Eyes on Teams. And it's a skill building class around how to actually make Teams meetings more engaging so that you don't experience that Zoom or team fatigue and you don't have people just drifting. And you also don't have meetings that just seem like they go on for forever and actually takes advantage of the tools that come with Microsoft Teams meetings. So that's a really great one for pretty much anybody who ever runs a meeting or even attends a meeting. So feel free to share this this particular episode with anybody in your office that you think would benefit from it. And then in May, we're shifting themes and looking more at productivity. So we're going to talk about how to level up your employee productivity with your Microsoft 365 strategy on the 13th. And then we're going to do a skill building class on actually collaborating within OneDrive and Teams and a few other applications for your everyday users on the 27th. So we got a couple of different things there. And we must have just been perfect today because we don't have any additional questions in the Q&A. But if you do have questions, Marissa, if you could go back a slide, you are Look at that. You're just magic. Feel free to reach out directly to either of us. We're always happy to talk more. As I'm sure you can tell, we both like to talk. And we are happy to engage with you. And whether it's about specific technologies, or even if you just have ideas for future webinars that you would like to see, definitely reach out. We're happy to take requests.
Absolutely.
And suggestions. Or answer more questions. But with that, I believe we are right. Oh, we have like 30 seconds left. Marissa, do you have more tips? I know you have more tips. Yammer all the way.
Just Yammer.
Just Yammer. Just Yammer. One of these days we will have a Yammer specific webinar, and Marissa will be very happy.
3-hour session.
Maybe yes, just a day-long workshop. All right, with that, thank you so much for coming to our first live episode and the Level Up series, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.